And welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them, perhaps even more. And welcome to this one on our, what I guess Jim and I would call our Remembrance Day edition. And we're looking at today a Canadian war movie, Passchendaele, written and directed by Paul Gross. Let me look at my show notes here. Here's from IMDb, the log line. The lives of a troubled veteran, his nurse girlfriend, and a naive boy intersect first in Alberta and then in Belgium during the bloody World War I Battle of Passchendaele. Again, written and directed by Canadian actor and director Paul Gross. It also stars Paul Gross, Joe Dinicol, and Carolyn Dhavernas. Also stars Adam Harrington, Meredith Bailey, Jim Mezon, Michael Greyeyes, and in a blink and you'll miss it, a couple of scenes, Gil Bellows. Let's get into the social nutrition checklist. Of course, would it qualify for a reframe stamp? No, it would not. It was union made. Did it pass the Bechdel test? No. And last but certainly not least, is it a class-conscious film? Good Lord, it is not. So yeah, that gives us, the poppies are obscuring it, but that gives us a score of 25%. So let's talk about now historicity. I'm going to keep this part short, in part because I feel that it has been, that we addressed it when we were talking about last week's movie. There's only two items I would recommend. First of all, there's a scene at the end, and we'll get into it when we're in the spoiler zone, but I did put a link. That part actually happened. Winnipeg's own Little Black Devils, the Royal Winnipeg Rifles, was briefly seen in this film. And what happened in the film basically happened in real life. But we'll talk more about that in the spoiler zone. There is a link to the Wikipedia blurb on it. I'd also, although I recommended a number of other resources last week, I have added to it, especially for those who are interested in the Canadian World War I experience, I added journalist and historian Pierre Burton's book, Vimy, regarding Vimy Ridge, the Battle of Vimy Ridge, and Canada and Canadian soldiers' role in that battle. And because I think Burton really did a great job, not just of talking about the battle, but talking about the impact of Canada's contribution, but the impact of the war and the fallout of the war, and what he in the end thought, maybe Canada would have been better off if they weren't involved at all. Anyway, so those two resources I'd recommend, plus the things I talked about last week. I'll put a link somewhere here, and I may even do a separate video on it. But moving forward, let's get out of that. And I guess it's time to jump right in and welcome my co-host with the most, Mr. Jim Cheboyko. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. The Bombers are in the cup, and I finished my work day, so it's all looking good.
Everything's coming up, Jim Cheboyko. Fantastic.
Everything's coming up, Jim. Yep. Everything's coming up, Jim House.
Oh, look at this, Ahmed Jelly Duck, our man in Kuwait City. Good to see you here, brother.
Hey.
Jim, you were saying to me, I do have, before we get into it, sure. There's a mailbag. There is an item that came in, a commenter on last week's movie that I think is relevant to this one. So with your permission, I'm going to bring it up.
Yeah.
Okay. Der Techniker commented on last week's movie regarding All Quiet on the Western Front, a German-made film. He says, or she says, in German war movies, you will never see heroes. That's why they're different to the Hollywood stuff. For entertainment, it's bad, but for humanity, it's good. And I thought that was a fascinating comment, and I wanted to highlight that. And I think we will, once we're in the spoiler zone, Jim, maybe refer back to it.
Yeah. It was good. I saw that earlier in the week too, and I thought it was a really salient point. Well put by Der Techniker. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
it's good to get comments from time to time.
Yeah, well, especially like an on-point one like that. We really appreciate it. Okay, so Jim, before we get into the meat of this flick, why don't you? I think we both have interesting, let's say, Passchendaele connections. You said you're kind of wowed and weirded out by yours.
Okay, so this one's more.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
This one's more about casting, so it's not a personal connection I have to, or anything supernatural or anything that happened regarding Passchendaele. But yesterday, Saturday, free day, my daughter and I had made some noise about wanting to go see the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre's network. It was the final show. Yep. It was Saturday afternoon at 4, which is, I guess, typical to have it at that time. And so we just sort of last minute got tickets, first row. We're the cheapest, so we sat in the first row. And
that's the way that goes.
And the lead, the one who plays the role of Howard Beale, which is the anchor man who threatens to kill himself, made famous by Peter Finch. It was, I think, his last or second last movie. He died, and then he posthumously won the Oscar for it. But the one playing it in this production was a Canadian actor named Jim Mezon, Winnipeg-born.
Who plays Dobson Hughes in this film.
Later that night, everyone's gone to bed. I turn on Passchendaele. I'm watching it. I watch the closing credits. It says Dobson Hughes, which is the sort of the bully South African veteran,
the villain of the piece, perhaps
the villain that comes down hard on our Michael Dunn. I'm looking at it. It says Dobson Hughes, Jim Mezon. So, not 12 hours earlier, I was in the same room with the dude who's in this movie, and it was, it's not a huge thing, but the level of coincidence, the level of the planets having to align for that was pretty startling. And everyone was asleep. I didn't want to tell you because I wanted to save it for the broadcast. And I was like, I got to tell someone, but there was no one to tell. But so anyways, saw this guy, and he's only made 14 movies. Like he doesn't have, it's not like he's Harvey Keitel and has made thousands of movies. But
he's
so
a Canadian theater guy more than, or a North American theater guy than a film guy.
In the flesh, was in the same room with the dude, and then he was in the movie that I watched.
That's super cool, man.
So, I was a little bit of a kind of a mind blow, but anyway. Yeah. And what's yours? You said you had a.
Okay, it's two minor ones. One, watching the movie, go through the whole credits. Deirdre Bowen. She's a big deal, like a big Canadian casting director. And at first I thought I looked stupid in front of Deirdre Bowen when I was auditioning for a role. Back when I had an ACTRA, I did have an ACTRA card. The apprentice member card. The other item, though, and this isn't so much weird or creepy, more just kind of, it's interesting. I felt this time I went with a friend of mine, Frank. You know him, Jim. He, of course, is an armed service, a former armed services member, armed forces member. He went Reg Force, but we both joined the same militia regiment at the same time. We went through the same basic military training course, BMT. And we both did it at Minto Armories, the home of what is now a reserve regiment, the Royal Winnipeg Rifles. So we went down to Minto for the Remembrance Day service on Friday. And
Oh, you
then
did?
I
Okay.
read this little tidbit and I'm like, that's noteworthy. Of course, what was also noteworthy, I mean, when Frank and I were in the reserves, this was the 80s, the Cold War. None of us, like at best, maybe as a militia member, you could end up in Germany, have a really cool job, a call out to Germany, and a cool job in Europe. No one's thinking we're going to go to war or anything. Of course, now we were there, and a lot of these reservists have seen active duty or been in areas adjacent to active duty, like they've done the job now. So it was a little odd
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
there for that service. And then watching this movie, and I'm like, kind of, yeah, there's noteworthy. I did not know that
Yes.
about the Little Black Devils,
Yeah. Yeah.
i.e., the Royal Winnipeg Rifles. So there you go. Um,
Yeah, that's very
uh,
interesting. Yeah, and Minto Armory is such a great old building in the central area of the city too. So
we did get a report in. Richard L saying my internet might look spotty. It's Jim. I've been coming in clear for you, eh?
yeah, yeah, no
Yeah.
delays, no.
That'll be restreamed then, Richard, or your internet. One of the two. Most likely restream. Sorry about that. I have zero control over that part. He does have another comment, though. Of course, him and Katie were in Europe, and they did visit Vimy Ridge and the Passchendaele
Ah,
era in Belgium last month. Yeah, they did a whole tour, if you follow them on social media, of that whole region, through Normandy and
yes,
into some of the World War One battlefields as well. Um, all right. Why don't we? Well, first of all, of course, let's say hello to Richard.
yes. Hi,
Good to
guys.
see him. And then, and of course, that means Katie Fowler will be somewhere nearby. And I can only hope that Restream decides to deliver you a good internet service. Because, yeah, I can see Jim fine and he see me fine. So
Yeah,
our feed is going to Restream that then goes to the internet. I mean, it could be YouTube, but I have no problem putting it on Restream. Okay,
yeah,
Jim, let's move forward
sure.
and let's get into the spoiler zone, shall we? Yeah, why don't you start us off? And um, what did you think? Of course, I want to go right to the end and the song at the end, but I will
Oh, yeah.
restrain myself.
Okay.
um, what was your take on the performances?
You know, I liked it. I liked the movie overall. The performances were a little bit uneven. I guess I like the two leads. Paul Gross is pretty likable, and I thought Caroline,
Dhavernas?
gonna miss Dhavernas. Thank you. I thought she brought some gravity to her role. I could believe her. Like I bought her as a troubled young woman. The role that really I think I felt was off putting was her brother David Mann. He
Played
was
by
kind of like
Joe Dinicol. Yeah.
yeah, I thought, boy, if you could get, and it's probably not the actor's fault, but if, boy, we couldn't afford Jay Baruchel, so we're going to get somebody with less charm, and it was sort of like, again, I don't mean to score off the poor actor, but I didn't, it was more the character. I didn't find that there was anything redeemable about him except for, his sister was that Paul Gross was in love with his sister.
Yeah.
But he was sort of whiny, and he couldn't even
Well,
cover his
let's
own
hold
tracks.
that then.
But yeah.
Hold
So
that then, because that's not really the
yeah,
performance as much as it's
yeah,
the
that's
guy,
true.
yeah.
In terms of the other performance, the Jim Mezon character who played Dobson Hughes, I thought he was actually pretty good as a heavy, and that English accent must be not a real one. I thought he did a passable English accent as well. And some of the other supporting roles, it was nice to see. I have a lot of time for Michael Greyeyes. but his role is very small in
Yeah.
this. I almost didn't remember it, but yeah, I mean, it was fine. Part of the problem for me was it had this almost this sort of CBC kind of heartland kind of lacquer over all of it, especially the Canadian scenes. And so at times, at certain moments, it felt a little bit like cosplay rather than a dramatic production. But I thought the war scenes were a lot more struck a lot more authentically.
Yeah.
How about you?
You know what? First of all, yeah, we're getting the apparently YouTube is not receiving enough data.
No.
You know, so the internet, you know what? So folks, the delays you are seeing are going on. I'm going to see if I can tweak my settings a little. I don't know if I can do that on the fly, but we'll find out. Let's see if we can just drop the bit rate a bit. Just to kind of. Oh, wait, that wouldn't be the case either. Never mind.
I'll write a little note here.
Yeah, folks, you know what? This is going to be one of those things where it's going to be, yeah, as I'm looking here.
Oops.
Yeah, it's one of those stream is healthy, stream is poor, stream is healthy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I'm getting you loud and clear. So we're just going to keep going. You know what? This will be, it'll end up being all loaded up. People can see it in the, it sucks, folks. But at the same time, I am recording it here, and the YouTube will eventually sort it all out. But yeah, sorry about that, everyone. That kind of bites. Always kind of sucks when the gizmo isn't cooperating.
Yeah.
All right. For myself, Jim, I your comments are fine by me. I mean, I didn't think I want to go back to, maybe I do have one thing, Dad. I want to go back to Joe Dinicol. Maybe he just doesn't have the chops. There are some, and part of it is he's a young guy, right? You know, some of it is the way the character's drawn. Dhavernas, like her character is not any great shakes either. And I agree with you. There's a couple moments in there. One when she's shooting up, where it's like she just has a little moment, you know, and it's like, I'm buying that, you know. Otherwise, yeah, Mezon, I agree. There is a guy who's like, oh, this is what I'm doing. Okay, I can do that. I'll give you that. That's what you want. I'll give you that. And that's what I mean about the chops. I think Mezon had the chops to just lean into what's otherwise kind of a cartoony villain, right? Whereas maybe Dinicol just didn't have what it took to engender sympathy in this boy, you know, just wants to go to war. But, oh well. What did you think? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in a way, it reminded me of those few seconds that you know, Luke appears kind of whiny in Star Wars, like, I don't want to deal with the evaporation technology, you know, that kind of when Uncle Owen's ordering him around and he wants to go into town or what have you. But yeah, it just it typical whiny young guy. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's fine. What did you think of the battle scenes?
Yeah, well, as we talked, I did watch some of the 1979 All Quiet on the Western Front, the made for TV movie, and yeah, I mean that was the one sort of thing where one aspect of that movie that had developed in the 30 years in the meantime. I thought I thought it was pretty good. A lot of bodies being thrown about. This was another movie that sort of, I guess, all along, World War One movies have slowly been incorporating more horror, more sort of, and we talked about this last week, more sort of gore and headless bodies and dead bodies being shot and things like that. So I didn't really have a problem with it. It might have been a little bit stagey, but at the very end, the third act, it's all kind of a quagmire, big muddy quagmire. Anyway, and I thought it was pretty well filmed, fairly coherent for as chaotic as it went. You could follow the action. There was one scene where Michael Dunn, Paul Gross, is talking, I think, to David Mann, and as he's talking, his gun is in the mud, and it's just sort of going further into the mud, and it would obviously cause some problems later on. But yeah.
Myself, I thought they were pretty solid. It is kind of comparing it to the movie we saw last week, which I think did the trenches way better. Here it was like everyone was in a shell hole. When how do I put this? When no one when most of us, so if you're a frontline soldier, most of your time is actually spent rotating in and out, doing boring shit. But if you're frontline, you're in a trench. And I think the All Quiet on the Western Front captured that well, captured the boredom well. Whereas here, it was really kind of, an hour and 54 minutes of, we're going to keep moving. And that said, you know what? It is half of the movies actually, or almost half of the movies in Alberta. So, well, apparently you're getting all kinds of errors, but there we go. Just throwing this up there in case people do see this. I will be posting a replay if the stream never gets better, but I can see, YouTube keeps buffering it, but not much I can do. This time I can honestly say I have zero control over this. What's important is Jim can hear me.
Yes.
Jim can hear me and I can hear Jim. So
I blame Elon.
I can't even blame Restream, actually. Restream is doing a good job. But for whatever reason, between me and YouTube, just not working out. Oh, and then we've got a comment from our good friend Walt, which I think we're going to come to. Actually, I'm going to take that off. We'll put a pin in it. We'll come back to that. I'm going to move straight into story, Jim.
Certainly, yeah.
Because I think let me summarize my comments on Craft. Other than picking on Mr. Dinicol, but we can even put some of that on Paul Gross and the story and even his direction. The other folks, I wish we'd seen more of Michael Greyeyes. Gil Bellows did his thing. The others they played the stock character they were meant to play. Like, I have no beefs or bouquets. The battle scenes were cinematic. I didn't feel like they were cheap or on the cheap. It had $20 million budget, which goes a long, long way in Canada when you don't have, when your star is not eating up the budget. I'm sure Caroline Dhavernas, I'm sure Gil Bellows, one of the reasons he was probably in for all of an hour, like he got a day in, it's like, sure, I'll do that for you, buddy. Anything more. And my agent's going to need a much bigger
3
check,
meals, Okay, 2 meals.
But so yeah, I felt like I'll give it this. This is the last thing I'll say on Craft. It looked like a real movie, like a big for the screen movie. Now let's move forward on story. But before we hit story, actually, I'm going to beg you all for a like. The three people that are sticking with us on the stuttering the stuttering stream, but a like, a subscribe, and then of course maybe ringy ding that bell.
Sorry, cat.
All right,
I woke up my cat.
Story. Let's talk about the story. Yeah, Jim, I mean, it has a beginning, middle, and end. The first scene is, I get what it's supposed to do. I thought it was kind of ridiculous. It's like, but I got what it was supposed to do. But I'm like, I really think this is a poorly executed story. Like everyone felt like, there's the stalk girlfriend. There's how did you put the brother, the whiny coward, the blustery, whiny, I don't like you and I want you to die. Mezon's Dobson Hughes. And of course, the evil British guy has to have the double-barreled hyphenated name, right?
Yes, yeah.
I really did feel that like stock bad guys, even the fake, I mean, yeah, there was anti-German sentiment. Absolutely. There was shaming of young men. Why aren't you in the war? But by 1917, too many had died. Like, you know what? The white feather of 1914 and 1915, where young women were given that stuff out as part of a recruiting effort in England, that had died out by 1917. Everyone was going, this is a long, hard slog. When is it going to be over? Anti-German sentiment would have been much higher by then. But, I'm like, this is Alberta. Like, I mean, they would have been hating the peacenik Hutterites and Mennonites, with all their German sounding names and language, even though they were, notwithstanding the bigoted history, but they were interning Ukrainians. And I mean, there was a lot more going on than just this guy who went back, and the daughter and the son. Like, even his love interest, that little subplot, the young guys, like, I just found nothing to like in this story. I never felt like I was going to be surprised at all. Jim, was there something, you did say you ended up liking this movie in the end.
Yeah.
What did you find? Why do you like it?
Well, I have to say that I sort of wish they could, like they do with some albums, re-engineer this and just strip it of of some of the just the extra stuff, some of the extra characters, some of the extra scenes. I thought the
wouldn't
main,
have a lot. There's only only an hour and 54 minutes. Might not be a lot left.
Yeah, no, it'll be like an hour. But I found the first act. I'll tell you what. I started watching this on Friday night. I watched about the first 40 minutes, and then my internet went out for some reason, or like the cable provider. Sometimes they do maintenance, late at night, and it just goes out for no real reason. So I just thought, well, screw that. I was right at the point just before they went sort of back to war, and they were still in Canada. And I just thought, this isn't very interesting. So the next night I picked up and watched it from where I left off, and it got a lot better. And maybe it was that sort of me watching it in two parts was made the difference, because that first part, I don't know, it really felt like sort of warmed over CBC, like almost like Heartland their ongoing series Heartland,
Yeah.
just 100 years before, and it was this, the music choices even, and sort of the weird tonal shifts, and ultimately, I think it really came. I mean, it's not the best movie I've ever seen, but the second and third acts do improve. I think once they sort of concentrate on different things, and I liked the character of Paul Gross, and the Michael Dunn, and I liked the nurse Sarah Mann, and I thought they had a sort of a touching relationship. But that first act, boy, if you can get by that, I know not a lot of people can. It's slow, and I don't think a lot of the conflicts are earned, and they focus a lot on that whiny David man, Sarah's brother, and then they almost kind of completely drop him. Like they show him a couple more times in the second and third acts, but you really don't. Once they get to the front, you really don't see him much.
No, and that's an interesting thing. They could have. It may have been a more interesting movie, Jim. Let's thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness, I'm coming in really dark here. You know what, Jim? People need to see more of me. How can I put this? What if we saw more of him? I imagine a world where he started the movie.
Mm-hmm.
He's there, the callow youth. And as he grows up through this horror meat grinder of war, that might have been a more interesting movie. Michael Gross still could have been that older hand and maybe that's the final thing, as Michael Gross's character sacrifices himself for his character, where he's like, wow, I really have been a shit. But it's right to the end he's a shit. And then the ridiculous, what? Oh, he's going to try and turn himself into the other side. In a weird kind of mirroring, like there was the young kid. Like, I'm sure that's why they did it. The mirroring of the young kid who just starts taking off all his stuff and gets shot by the Germans. But it's still like, what? Like, what? Well, then he is not even redeemed in his injury.
Yeah.
Like, it's the guy who carries the cross and even he doesn't need, like, the only person who needs to be redeemed is the one who isn't redeemed. He goes home without a leg. He's still an asshole.
Yeah.
His sister's smiling at him. It's like, what? You almost want to reach into the TV and say, let me tell you about your brother.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's even bitchy to her at the start. I mean, he's the only family she's got left, I guess. But,
well, and lies to her, like, strictly out of cruelty, lies to her halfway through the story, which is so melodramatic. And what kills me is like, okay, then make him a true bad guy, like second only to Dobson, or maybe he turns into the real evil shit, right? Like I thought of Ken Follett, who handles this melodrama so much better, as they come and they almost become lovers, and then they're torn apart again, by somebody's lie. Like it made me think of Atonement. Another one where a young person, a sibling, lies and tears lovers apart. And yeah, I'm like, well, then do that. Make him the bad guy. It's like they weren't willing. Gross wasn't willing to do that, and it's like, why? Like, in a way, it's like no one deals with their problems. There is no growth here. Even Paul Gross, it's like he seems to have a pretty good handle on why he's like got the shakes and dreams. He's willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, like none of it really, and this is the thing, like, so it's got this beginning, middle, and end, but it's also got these stock characters, these stock villains, these out of an older time kind of problems. I have to prove myself to this man. Yeah, it's just, by the end of it, you're like, and a father that we never see. We don't even get a flashback on. So we don't get a flashback on the mother. We don't, so there's these other poignant moments that we're only told about. We never see, and so it's like, we don't get to care about that either. Yeah, Jim, I think this is a really weakly told story. And what kills me about it is that there's opportunities here to tell a much better tale. And it's like, and it's like the movie drives by them. Oh yeah, that'd be a totally cool road to go down. Nope, sorry, we got to hit Brandon by. We're on our way to Toronto. no sights, no turnoffs, no. Let's explore this idea. Even, I mean, there's like 3 movies hinted at in this movie I'd love to see again from the boy's perspective.
Well, do you get the sense that there's a bigger, like there's either a 4-hour movie here or a lot of stuff ended up on the cutting room floor, or maybe it was supposed to be a longer, like a CBC miniseries? They refer, when Gil Bellows' character comes to visit for that little part in the first act, he says, "Oh, got postcards from Highway," who's the First Nations character that they don't really show too much of, but they infer that all these guys grew up together, and you don't even really you have to infer is the word. You have to infer this because they don't really sort of talk about it, right? And so there's things like that. There's little hints dropped here and there, and you just don't. When it turns out that the father was fighting, when the father of Sarah and David was killed on Vimy Ridge, he was actually fighting for the Germans, and that's shown as a. And then I thought about all the mechanics, like how do they know that, and how did that news travel down the pike, and everyone's in everyone else's business, which is sort of like a Downton Abbey kind of thing, like a lot of overheard conversations and that kind of thing.
But, you know what, I it's hard to say, and I want to hold my powder on the why, on some of the why, until we get into meaning. But I don't think a lot was left on the cutting room floor. I don't think I don't think that's. It makes me want to watch Hyena Road again. For those of you who don't know, and I will put a link. Jim and I had a conversation about that one, and I don't think we came out going wowzers on that either. But it's still a better film. Here's an accomplishment. Passchendaele makes me think of Hyena Road in a more positive light. Gross is a better filmmaker by Hyena Road.
This was 14 years ago. Yes.
Yeah, this was far before that. I think he just, but I think there's something in there. Let's jump to the comment. One comment I want to highlight right now. Walt says, where are we here? Boy, and I even watched as much of Passchendaele as I could manage. Maybe just as well. I wasn't going to be too kind. Nice intention, but the Aussies do it much better. Walt. You may not be able to see this because I can see YouTube is still buffering and then spitting some out and then buffering and spitting some out. But I agree. This is not a well-told story. It has too many stock characters. And partly I think it's, even though you have 3 core characters, one of them is just way too. Make him the villain. Make the boy the villain. Or make it about the boy. Or make it about make it about the girl. Make it about Caroline Dhavernas and her like how she, her father leaves her and her kid brother. So all of a sudden she's got to be the responsible adult. And then she's doing this, and all of a sudden she's taking drugs, because that, like a lot of nurses, like a lot of help people in healthcare, not this is not to say, oh, people in healthcare are always on drugs, more because it's there, the stress is there, and the thing to quickly alleviate the stress is there. You know what? I bought that she could be addicted, and I liked that storytelling choice. You know, make it about her, and that kind of a war from her perspective as a nurse who all of a sudden has to make a choice about, you know, I got to do something about these drugs I'm on. And yeah, I get part of it could be the love of a good man. Why not? Sure. Paul Gross can be that, the love of that good man. But yeah, I think the movie, they it's like they took the boring route. No, we're going to stick to the interstates. We're going to world's largest ball of yarn. Yeah, that's like, I mean, that's 100 meters off the highway. No, it's like, but I can see the top of it. Nope, sorry, kids. Here's Yahtzee. Play. Here's a magnetic thing of Yahtzee. Play that.
Point A to point B. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, in terms of story, I think, yeah, you're right about that. A couple of the things that I liked about the story, maybe just ingredients of the story rather than the whole thing, was that it did deal with Paul Gross's emotional state. So he could be her, and again, with all these fresh new generations of World War I movies, they tackle a little bit more, like the PTSD and the neurasthenia, as it's called in this one. And so a lot of the wreckage that they're dealing with is internal, and it's mental.
The trauma, the trauma of the experiential trauma, and
also the pushback from the people who didn't serve, who are back at home saying, "Yeah, what a coward," you know, and that kind of thing. Yeah. And it was a brutal war, fought methods that were long outdated, but so that's one aspect of it. I liked both their internal struggles. Sarah Mann, the nurse, and Michael Dunn. They did, I think, sort of handle that nicely. And that's why the two main characters were I think the most interesting. And if all there was that, if you had a minimalist film director that had nice, long, quiet shots, maybe not even as much dialogue as they had in this movie, I think it would have been, I'm not saying Terrence Malick or anything, but, if you had somebody of that ilk, or even, some of the handling of how they did the All Quiet on the Western Front, the new version, the 2022 version. Yeah. A lot of long shots, it took its time, that kind of thing. No, you might have had sort of a more patient, better movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Longer or more streamlined, but more time committed to what was left story-wise.
Yeah.
Let's, you know what, before we get into meaning, Jim, I think it is time, first of all, to once again beg everyone for anybody's actually watching it. Oh my goodness. Just for whatever reason, it does not want to come up. Oh, there we are. Please like, subscribe, and ringy-ding that bell. What was I going to say there? Why don't you tell us about what are we looking at next week, Mr. Chaboyko?
Yes. Wakanda Forever. We're taking a look at the new Black Panther movie. I almost forgot. I was like, what are we looking at? But Wakanda Forever, the newest.
We're looking at another movie.
We are. Yeah. And one that has everyone all agog or all aflutter. I'm not sure what, all akimbo. But the latest just released this weekend, and it's I'm sure there'll be lots that we'll be reading about and spoiling and all that kind of thing. But
yeah, that will definitely be our spoiler take. But folks, for you who haven't seen it, Jim and I do have a spoiler-free, what I'm now calling officially parking lot review. So I will put a link somewhere, probably over there somewhere. Anyway, I'll put a link to our spoiler-free parking lot review. And next week, I think I don't think this will be much of a spoiler. You'll find us speaking of this film a lot more positively than the one we're looking at today. Let's get into meaning now, Jim. And
sure.
Let me ask you this. Where would you put this? Do you think this is a pro-war movie, an anti-war movie, or an ambiguous movie? What do you think? Oh, good grief. What do you think Paul Gross wants us to take away after watching this?
Yeah, I guess I would say, I mean, the obvious answer is anti-war, but I kind of wonder if there's a sneak theme that you're going to bring up in there. But it does give some characters. There's a lot of talk about heroism, whether it's these few men being able to hold off the Germans or even a lot of what Paul Gross's character Michael Dunn is able to do. Despite all of his internal struggles, he's still able to sort of pull the mission off and save the boy and do that kind of thing. So in a way, whenever you're dealing, like that comment that we got from Dear Techniker, if I'm getting that name right, is that if there's heroes, then it's a heroic story. I just boil it down a little bit. So he's given the permission to be heroic. So that, that's a little bit of a mixed message. I'd say overall it's anti-war. A lot of death and, just get used to the headless body. That's kind of a horrifying, sentiment anywhere, not just on the battlefield. So how about you? Is that what you thought? Or did you think there was a sort of a sneaky way around it? Or
I think there's a sneaky way around it. I think this follows in. Now, this is a developing idea of mine, which I suspect some academic has previously written. Their theses have been written about this, but new to me, developing to me. I think, Jim, this is a pro-war movie masquerade. All pro-war movies now, you can't talk about the glory of war anymore. That died after World War II. But you can talk about the heroism of the individual soldier, the justness of the cause, and I think this is the way a lot of these films kind of get around that. They still want to celebrate the individual acts of war. They just repackage it. He's still a heroic guy. And if he didn't fucking stick the one thing, what's interesting, the one thing that he feels bad about at the beginning of the film, the opening scene, Paul Gross, the Dunn character, the one thing he feels bad about, not taking the machine gun emplacement, not blowing up the guys, it's killing the unarmed kid at the end of it. And rightly so. But he feels his pain, and that's what makes it okay. In the end, though, you look at who funded this film, the Dominion Institute, which is one of the forebears of Historica Canada. You look at the names on there, it's a bunch of oil money that's in this. It's super Alberta, the province of Alberta put money in this to celebrate Canadian history, which is really, and you feel that in Alberta, they have a pride in their military history that's kind of disturbing. And this is really in this movie. I think it's actually borderline, or not even borderline. I'm just going to call it propaganda. Just because Gross is a willing propagandist does not change the fact that it's propaganda. You know, that, you know what, there's a part of me, it's like, boy, he could have been the next Michael Bay. You know, if he was American, if he grew up in the United States, he'd be that. But he's left in Canada, where we have a kind of complicated relationship with our military past. And so he has a harder time with, or he doesn't get the support he would south of the border. But yeah, I would argue it's a pro-war movie, but a post-World War II pro-war movie, and everyone's going to say war is hell and that there's bad people making decisions. Whereas I think, and this goes to you're absolutely right, to Techniker, and it bears bringing up again. You'll never see heroes. Entertainment, it's bad, but for humanity, it's good. But he is, like, you look at the film we saw last week, All Quiet on the Western Front, and one of its overarching themes is, yeah, all these deaths are pointless. The good die, the bad live, sometimes the bad die and the good live. There's a randomness to it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas, here you get some really ridiculous religious imagery, a death full of meaning for Paul Gross. It's a redemptive death, even though I'm like, why does he need to be redeemed? And why is Carolyn Dhavernas still being, why is she smiling at the end of it? There's a woman who gets to go, this sucks,
Yeah.
And there's the kid kind of going, oh yeah, I've now known war and I can get the girl. It's like just but not topsy-turvy. It's topsy-turvy, but all with meaning. I think dumb meaning, the wrong meaning to draw, but still with meaning. And I think that's what, philosophically, that's where it is. This doesn't mean that it can be we were soldiers once. Another bit of propagandic pro-war, but war is hell, post-World War II movie, starring and directed by a very problematic individual, Mel Gibson. That's a well-told story. That's a really well-told story. That's a great movie, notwithstanding the problematic star and director, and it's very much pro-war meaning. It's intent. But it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, geez, Paul, you're going to drag me through 2 hours of this. Do it that way. Don't make it so obvious, and don't make it so contradictory. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my thinking.
The other thing too, when you're dealing with random things and random passages and fates and things like that, you're always kind of dealing as well with the just world hypotheses.
Saying goodbye to Dragon Movie Guys, got to go by the sub shot. And I think we've lost most of our viewers anyway, as the stream keeps saying it's bad, it's good, it's bad, it's good.
Yeah.
Stream is healthy. Stream isn't. Stream is. Stream isn't. Like a third of our frames have been dropped. It's like
Elon.
Who knows? Anyway,
Elon's fault.
Sorry, say that again.
When you're dealing with random fates and things like that, you're also dealing with just world hypotheses, right? So it's just like, maybe they deserve this, and that kind of thing too. So
well, look at Dobson Hughes.
Tricky thing. Yeah,
he dies. You know what?
Yeah.
Dies a just death. It's good. He gets it. Paul Gross's character has a heroic death, saving other lives.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
looking up at his gal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He even gets to say goodbye. He does not die alone. He dies with a loved one, for fuck's sakes.
the other thing that's interesting is the Dobson Hughes character is allowed to know that he's dying, because they show him sort of like blinking a bit and kind of going, "Oh fuck,"
Yeah.
as his gush, and that's
Yeah.
always a thing, that if a bad guy dies, it's not going to be instantaneous. It's going to be like, one of the ingredients is that he has to know that
Yeah.
he's on his way out. Ha ha, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that hurt me.
Yeah.
I think that's my. Yeah, I think he does. To ask myself the question I asked you, what is the takeaway here? What does Paul Gross want us? I think he does want us to look at our military past in a heroic light, and he can, and it's one of those things. It's, well, the people who dragged us into this, the British, they can be the villains. But what those boys did needs to be respected and celebrated. And I am not saying that there isn't a great Canadian War movie out there, Jim, that can do that while still can be an All Quiet on the Western Front meets Pierre Burton's Vimy, which is both a celebration and at the end you go, what a waste, what a fucking waste of human potential. I just don't, it ain't this movie. I haven't seen it yet. Doesn't mean it isn't out there. And it may just not be out there right now. It's some writer out there is scribbling away, and maybe the right director, maybe it is Paul Gross, and a more accomplished and mature filmmaker going, no, I can deliver this. This is part of what I was trying to get at. Because you're right. There is some things in here. The older hand, this reminds me of Gardens of Stone. James Caan's character in Gardens of Stone, him and James Earl Jones, and you're going, no, there is no point. The character's racist. The intent of the film, I think, is still kind of racist, but at least there it's like, no, there's nothing good about there. It's all bad. It all sucks. There is no meaning. Don't volunteer for that. That's stupid. You're here alive. That's the only good thing. And and I think that's part of what Paul Gross was going for, but it just doesn't work in this film.
Yeah. I would add, in terms of message, though, that again, bringing it back to the dyad of Sarah and Michael, which is the most interesting part, I think, of the movie, or the part that works the best, is that there's a real undercurrent of acceptance / forgiveness, or even just being non-judgmental. Yeah. And that's not really, he sees her little needle kit, and he sort of puts 2 and 2 together. This guy's, been around. He knows what's going on, and no judgment on his part. He's just like, I don't care. I've robbed banks, and so she doesn't care about. So this is more on a character level rather than on a story or historical level. I thought that was one of the more sort of successful messages, was that just the, I'm not going to come down on you. We'll get, we'll deal with this. It's not a deal.
He does cure it overnight, but what the hell? You only have an hour. You only have a couple of hours. Some things have to be cured quickly to move on.
This is going to be a rough 20 minutes. And the other one too, she said, I don't have to take it every day. Is that, but I don't know.
I think that's a lot of addicts. They're not, we've been given a television version of, once you can't get away, that's certainly some addicts, not every addict. I love Walt's comment here. Give it another try, and it actually seems worse. As you know, again, regrettable. Although it could also mean that he's just talking about the live stream, which is terrible. Yeah. But,
I should mention too that I sort of wonder openly about my own objectivity, it being a Canadian movie, and if this was a movie from another country, would I be willing to sort of crap on it a little more easily?
You're cutting it more slack because you see that maple leaf on a lot of stuff.
Just to be completely honest, but at the same time, I think that there was a sweetness to that main relationship too that I think sort of,
I agree with you. And that moment was nice. Like just as when she's shooting up, it didn't, the fact that they can kind of go, no, she's a real person getting high, not drug addict, that he is, someone who's like, I've done bad things as well. Like that there's a maturity in we're all doing our best here. Again, I just said that those two moments do not.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, we're definitely moving out of the meaning here. And while I take this opportunity for the few that are actually still out there, to ask for one more time for a like, a subscribe, and a ringy ding of the bell. Many thanks, sir. Why don't we get into our own denouement here? And let me ask you this. What would you give? Jim, what would you give Mr. Gross as the director here? You give him a pretty easy marker.
I give him a C.
C?
Give him a C, I guess. Yeah.
You know what? I admire that about you, Jim. Myself, I'm a little harder marker. And I don't know if it's, I'm not I'm giving him a D. Like I would fail him on this. This is a fail. It's not an F. It's not a disaster, but much like I said about Black Adam. Oh, speaking of which, I did a solo parking lot review.
Yes.
And that was, you know what? I took one for the team, Jim, watching Black Adam.
I saw the right movie.
Yes. Yeah. Folks,
I saw the right
really
Black
did. It really did come down to, are we going to see, are Jim and I going to see Black Adam? Or are we going to see Wakanda Forever? And, cause I was going to see something with him, or I was going to see something with my, brother and, my nephew. And in the end, we ended up doing it that way. And yes, Jim, you should be appreciative. You should say thank you to my brother and my nephew as well.
Taking a bullet.
Anyway, unlike Black Adam, which I also is not a good movie either. It does not have The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. If Dwayne Johnson was in this, he is so easy to watch in a film. He is such a capital M, capital S movie star.
Yeah.
I would not, but it's a fail. This is not an awful movie, but it's a bad movie. I can see why it didn't do well with the critics. I can see why I barely remembered it from the first time I watched it, years ago. And while I'll probably forget everything about it years from now, Anyway, that's my feeling on the subject.
I should say I did give him bonus points for identifying correctly the kestrel, which shows up in a Eurasian kestrel. I realize because the ones over here are American kestrels, but little bird watching bonus point there for anybody who's into that sick and depraved hobby. But,
well, and if you have to give it extra points for a bit of bird watching, then I think that answers the question on how good this movie really is.
Yes. Yeah.
Not that good. All right. Jim, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Oh, the Kestrel thing was pretty much it, I think. But yeah, no, I think we covered. I think we covered it all. Yeah, no other notes here. So,
Cool
how
beans.
about you?
You know what? No, I think I kind of said my piece. I even the last song was terrible.
Oh
Like it
yeah, you
was
were going to say
just
yeah.
so bad. Like I'm not saying that it was a poorly made song or anything, but it's just you know what? One of those things
Not
where
well
I'm
placed.
thinking oh my goodness. Snowbird, help me out
Oh,
here.
Anne Murray.
Anne Murray. Like
Yeah.
it was like low rent Anne Murray, you know, and it's like this is just all bad. You know,
Mhm.
like I mean, you know, it's so obviously capital C, capital P, Canadian patriotism, you know,
Mhm.
and the most jingoistic Ralph Klein, Alberta. And it was Ralph Klein who approved like the millions of dollars from the province of Alberta for this patriotic nonsense. Yeah, and right to the last movie, it was just this is not good. Um, but you know, Caroline Dhavernas, one of my early Canadian screen crushes, you know, character
Mhm.
crushes. That was all right. And yeah, Paul Gross is it's entertaining to watch. And
Mhm.
yeah, there was a couple of characters that were kind of again, there's like three different movies that would have been so much better that are hinted
Yeah.
at in this. Oh well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's about it for me. And you know what? Everybody in the chat, thank you all so very much for sticking with
Gee,
it. If you
yeah.
have, you might have long gone. You know what? There
Yeah.
will be a
I haven't
replay.
looked.
We will repost it. But Walt 65, DMG, um, Jelly Duck 100, our man in Kuwait City. Richard L and Katie Fowler, thank you guys all for coming out. And yeah, just really sorry that the stream's so crappy. I'm not in charge of the this may shock you, but I am not in charge of the internet. So on that note, remember next week we will be watching Wakanda Forever. Um, yeah, hope to see you here next week when we hope that the internet gods have decided to smile upon us.
Damn you,
Oh,
Elon.
it's all
He's up to
Elon's
something
fault.
with his
uh,
Kruger ends.
all right, everybody. Bye bye, everybody.
See you later.
Oh, what did you think there, Mr. Jaboyko?
Good. Good. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, the technical issues suck,
yeah,
but at least they tried. Our pals gave us a shot, I think, and
I
it
think
looks
so.
like some of them tried to re-enter and that sort of thing. But yeah, it
Yeah.
sucks.